and we'll get all cranked up here. And I'm going solo tonight. Miss Renee is on vacation this week. She actually sent me a text this afternoon and said how I have brainwashed her. All she talked about on the way to where they were going were rocks and anticlines. So uh, I'm sure her husband was about ready to kill her or me. I'm not sure which one, but but anyway, thanks for joining us tonight. And
I'll fix this audio.
everybody always asks, "What is Labor Day?" or "What was Labor Day?" And as in the past, so Labor Day is a celebration that the pressure to lose weight for the summer is finally over. So that's what Labor Day is all about. Okay. It's also happy Labor Day to all the moms who uh who are out there. I really don't think we have a maybe a couple moms tonight. We appreciate everything that you've done. So for Labor Day. And my buddy Ken Fraser that's in the room tonight, he sent me this joke yesterday. I have to use it. Is that everybody's acquainted with Neil Diamond. Really, his original name was Neil Cole until he the pressure got to him eventually, and he became Diamond. So uh, Ken will take the blame for that, not me. But anyway, so I just we just got back from vacation last night. We were in Myrtle Beach area for a week, and then I was blessed with being at the Southern 500 NASCAR race Sunday night at Darlington. Uh, I was supposed to be there with another gentleman who he and his wife were coming home from a summer vacation in Florida, and they left Friday from their second home down there to come back up to meet us in South Carolina. And Friday night, his car broke down near Orlando, and they had it towed to the dealership, which looked at it Saturday morning and said, "You need a new oxygen sensor. We can't get that until Tuesday." So they were stuck in Florida for Saturday through today. I had a text from them a little bit ago saying that they were halfway through Georgia. Not sure how far they're going to come tonight, but he was not able to get to the NASCAR race with me. So um, and Terry's actually a usual here too. Yeah, he's not here late either. So anyway, let's get started here with our intro, if we would. And like I said, I'm playing solo tonight, and we're doing our the 151st episode soloing tonight. And of course, always sponsored by Lair Architect in Lake Havasu City. And check out our website, Jones Geological Services, jonesgeo.us. Reminder coming up that my final bus trip of the year for the Spring Grove area Historical Preservation Society is coming up in 2 weeks on September 15th, Gettysburg Battlefield. We're going to talk about how geology affected the battlefield, affected the battle. And of course, that ties in tonight's program with Steve Lindberg's program. If you're not signed up for the bus trip yet, uh, Tracy says the deadline is September the 8th. If you do want to meet the bus in Gettysburg, instead of coming the whole way to Spring Grove, the cost for you will only be $85 instead of $100. We do have a few people coming from that neck of the woods out that way. So there will be a pickup in Gettysburg for those folks. So anyway, you can register online if you go to the uh, website for the Spring Grove Area Historical Preservation Society, which is down here in the corner, sgahps.com, and you'll find the bus trip. Um, Announcement, Rock Cutters open house coming up uh, on September the 20th and 10 to 2. This is in Abbottstown, Pennsylvania, along Route 30. They're only 1 mile west of the York Airport. And he has loads and loads of material and equipment actually for sale. Kevin is the one that bought the entire collection, the Brian Cole collection that was for sale last August, September, October area. Lived in the Caledonia State Park area. So that'll be coming up on September the 20th. You don't want to miss that. The Zoom Rock Room schedule tonight, as I mentioned, Steve Lindberg going to do a real interesting program, which I have not seen yet myself. The forensic geology of the Gettysburg battlefield and vicinity. Uh, in 2 weeks, a glimpse into environmental geography of Scotland and the United Kingdom by our friend Dr. Jennifer Pomeroy, professor at York College of Pennsylvania, who just returned from her trip to Scotland. October 7th, Aaron Lawson is going to join us. He's from the Edelman Fossil Park and Museum in New York, in New Jersey. A brand new opened site. Great museum. I've been reading a lot of comments about it. That it's a little expensive, but it's worth it. So if you ever have the opportunity to go into southern Jersey, check out the Edelman Fossil Park and Museum. There are several members of our Zoom Rock Room who are not in here tonight that have been there already. October 21st, I'll be doing some of my favorite geologic sites in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. So that's what we have coming up through October. A couple of interesting little notes, all earthquake related tonight. You may have been reading about this on Facebook. Abbeville, South Carolina, this is Abbeville County, in the northwestern section of South Carolina. Last week they had about 13 earthquakes within several days that have gotten the residents all risen up and wondering what's going on. It seems like it's a earthquake swarm being caused by something. Not sure what that something is, but there are some people from the uh, College of Charleston, South Carolina, that actually are researching that. So here's where all the earthquakes have been happening. Here's Abbeville down here in the corner. So all these earthquakes are plotted right there. Nothing. I don't think there's anything over a 3 or a 3.2 was the largest one. So it's in very, very old rock. It's in rock that's about 1 billion years old. Number of faults in the area. So that area is a little bit tensed up right now. And you may have been hearing about Nevada. Has been rattling a little bit. They've had 5 or 6 earthquakes. This one happened on Saturday, 5.0 in northern Nevada. It's within the Range and Basin province, which is an area that is actually trying to pull apart. So the crust is thinning as it's being stretched, and the USGS does kind of at this point think that that's the cause for these earthquakes to relieve some stress. Some other scientists have said that some of the work being done at the two large gold mines right in the same area with drilling and blasting may be affecting and causing movement also, like lubricating fault zones with water for easy slippage. Apparently, the USGS, from what I read, kind of said no to that one at this point. So, anyway, just keep your ears open for Nevada and particularly South Carolina going on. So, we do want to recognize our other sponsors, as in Retro Rocks and Buttonwood Nature Center, are all, of course, our sponsors. And for anybody that's in the room tonight who gave me some comments saluting our 150th episode 2 weeks ago, thank you for your comments. We appreciate it, and show turned out really well. I think it's online if you have not seen the video. So it's kind of a neat adventure. So anyway, um, so without further ado, I'm going to give our speaker as much time tonight as I can. But Mr. Steve Lindberg doesn't really need an introduction, although he does, because he's a fabulous scientist, professor at University of Pitt at Johnstown. And if you follow him at all, if you belong to the Facebook page, for example, Rock Hounding, Steve is uh, very professional on there about explaining to people about what their specimen is and compared to what it can't be. Uh, he does great great verbiage, better than me, on Facebook on PA Rock Hounding. So uh, I even learn from his comments sometimes. So anyway, uh, he's going to come tonight, and he's gonna talk about the forensic geology of the Gettysburg area. Steve, it's all yours.
Okay, let's get the, let's see, we'll share, and that should come up. And we'll go full screen, enter full screen. How's that? Are we good? Everyone can see that?
We're good.
All right. So, Jerry, thank you once again. I always enjoy coming to Rock Room and speaking. What I'm going to present to you tonight is kind of a synopsis, a compilation of several different presentations that I've put together. I've tried to merge them seamlessly. I've titled it Forensic Geology at Gettysburg. Besides spending a career studying geology, I'm also, let's say, I'll use the word an enthusiast, an amateur historian of the American Civil War, the war between the North and the South. And that stems back to my childhood. My dad was a big Civil War enthusiast. He collected an enormous amount of Civil War equipment, weapons, insignia, all types of equipment and accoutrements. I still have, my brother and sister and I split that up, and we still have all of those items after my dad passed away. But besides being interested in geology, I'm also extremely interested in the Civil War. We go to Gettysburg at least 3 times a year. I'll be back in Gettysburg again at the end of October for the Franklin County Rock and Mineral Show at the South Mountain Fairgrounds, and I'll be going down a day or two early to walk the battlefield again. Every time I go down, I find something new, a new place to explore that I've never seen before. So what you're going to see tonight, part of this I presented at last year's field conference of Pennsylvania geologists because we were stationed at Gettysburg. It was kind of the prequel uh, to a field trip, pre-conference field trip that I ran that I think was very well received. I had over 40 people on it, and I took them to different sites on the battlefield that typically tourists do not go to. They were kind of out of the way. So, pre-warning is that in order to show you some of the things tonight about Gettysburg, I had to include photographs taken by Civil War photographers that unfortunately show corpses on the battlefield and bodies. And so I kind of am treading on ground there where I don't want to offend anyone, but it's kind of difficult to talk about the severity of Civil War battles and the massive loss of life without kind of showing the results of those types of uh, uh, battles, and especially Gettysburg. So let's see, I should be able to advance here. And a quote from Robert E. Lee: "It is well that war is so terrible, or we should grow too fond of it." And unfortunately, we don't adhere to that. So, just a disclaimer, all the photographs, maps, and other graphics used in this presentation, all Civil War photographs that were taken by Matthew Brady, Alexander Gardner, Timothy O'Sullivan, all of the Civil War photographers, these photographs are available with no copyright on the Library of Congress website. There are literally thousands of them, and they are open for use with no copyright restrictions. So most of the photographs that I show you, the black and white photographs and even the colorized ones of the Gettysburg battlefield, taken shortly after the battle or years after the battle, are without any copyright restrictions. My own photographs that you'll see in the presentation tonight, you're free to use. Of course, Jerry's recording this and it'll go up on the Rock Room website, and that's fine. So there's my disclaimer. So just as an introduction to Gettysburg, and I told Jerry, knowing that his tour of the Gettysburg battlefield's coming up on September 15th, I told him that I would stick, not specifically talk about the details of the battle, but just cover more of the forensic geology, and specifically two locations on the battlefield that I found most fascinating, that were unknown for over 100 years. And now we know where those photographs were taken. And we'll get to that during the program. So just a short little introduction here. Of course, we know the Civil War began in April 1861. We're not going to go into the causes and all that. That's something that Jerry can cover on his tour. But when the Confederates opened up on Fort Sumter, although there were exchanges of gunfire before the attack on Fort Sumter, we normally mark the April 12th, 1861 South Carolina attack on Fort Sumter as the opening volley of the Civil War. So the Civil War began in April 1861, and it ended at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th, 1865, with Robert E. Lee surrendering part of the Confederate forces at Appomattox Courthouse. A few weeks after his surrender on April 9th, the Confederates still had an extremely large standing army, but was in a very, very poor condition. And that was under the command of Joe E. Johnston. And there were at least 90,000 Confederates in a second army, and they surrendered on April 26th. During the 4 years of the Civil War, there were close to 11,000 engagements, although there were only about 50 major battles, and about a total of 100 significant battles. The forces broke down as follows. At maximum strength, the Union Army consisted of 2.6 million men. That was not just soldiers in the field, but that included all of the supporting troops, cavalry, commissary, medical. So the Union Army stood at about 2.6 million. I have that broken down for you there. 2.4 million white soldiers, about 179,000 African American soldiers, and 3,500 Native Americans. The maximum strength for the Confederate Army is more difficult to pin down. It ranges from 750,000 to 1.2 million. The Union Army kept much, much better records than the Confederate Army. When we talk about casualties, casualties include battlefield deaths and also death from infection, death resulting from surgeries following a wound, starvation, disease. We're looking at about, when we analyze the death records and payments paid out to widows after the Civil War, we're looking at about 620,000 total soldiers died during the 4 years of the Civil War. We've been looking at those numbers again with new records that have been uncovered, and we think that estimate might go as high as 850,000 total casualties during the American Civil War. The largest battles with the greatest number of casualties during the Civil War are up here in the upper right-hand corner. Of course, Gettysburg at 51,000 casualties. That includes killed, wounded, and those that died following the battle from their wounds. The 7 Days Campaign, or the Peninsula Campaign, in which a new Confederate general, Robert E. Lee, took command of the Army of Northern Virginia, Chickamauga, Chancellorsville, and Antietam, and then some other breakdowns there. So to set kind of things in perspective here, we are in the second year of the American Civil War. There are tens of thousands of men dead on each side. What was expected to be a several-month campaign to put down the rebellion of the Confederate States turns into a major conflict between the North and the South. The Confederate Army in the spring of 1863 is hemorrhaging. They've been battling for 2 years. Losses are staggering, and a relatively new general takes command prior to Gettysburg, Robert E. Lee. The South has great confidence in Robert E. Lee, and commanding the Army of Northern Virginia, Robert E. Lee has substantial, overwhelming, maybe not overwhelming, but Robert E. Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia has substantial victories over the Union Army. The first one being the Battle of Fredericksburg in the winter before Gettysburg, from December 11th through the 15th in 1862. The Union Army and the Army of Northern Virginia meet in Fredericksburg, Virginia. The Union Army totals at that meeting, at that battle, is about 123,000 troops and about 78,000 Confederates. Confederates are outnumbered, but there is a major victory for Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. Losses are extremely high. This boosts the morale of the Army of Northern Virginia. The Second Battle of Fredericksburg, where Civil War photographers were more prominent following the battle. And those are the two Library of Congress photographs that you can see at the bottom of the page. The one on the left are Union troops at the Second Battle of Fredericksburg getting ready to engage the Army of Northern Virginia. The photograph on the right is a famous photograph taken at Mary's Heights, overlooking Fredericksburg. A day or two after the battle, there are still bodies in the trench here. This is the famous stone wall behind which the Confederates pretty much slaughtered during both battles at Fredericksburg, the advancing Union troops coming uphill. The First and Second Battle of Fredericksburg really boosts the confidence of the Army of Northern Virginia. But probably the most famous victory for the Army of Northern Virginia and General Lee is Chancellorsville. In Chancellorsville, Virginia, from April 30th to May 6th, and this just precedes Lee's decision that now is the time to invade the North and destroy the Army of the Potomac and take Washington, D.C., and end the war. At Chancellorsville, the Union Army and Confederate Army meet. The Confederates are overwhelmingly outnumbered, 57,000 to 97,000. The Union Army was carelessly led by the generals at that time. At Chancellorsville, Lee is famous for splitting his force in half and leaving half of the force to face the Union Army, while the second half of his army proceeded north to outflank the Union Army. And then he split it in half again and attacked the Union Army with 1/4 of his force. The victory is overwhelming. This is when Stonewall Jackson is mortally wounded by his own troops. A series of black and white photographs of the aftermath of Chancellorsville. The one on the right, I'm going to move my little panel here of participants. Union troops encamped several days below the battle. These are Matthew Brady photographs, remains of the dead in the woods, and Matthew Brady near trees that are shattered by artillery. One of the things that I should mention is that photography, battlefield photography, is coming into a golden age during the Civil War. Civil War photographs taken by Matthew Brady, Alexander Gardner, Timothy O'Sullivan. We look at these Civil War photographs in black and white, and they're remarkably sharp and crisp. You can pick out detail that you can't even see on film photography from like the 1970s and 1980s before digital. And the reason for that is Civil War photographs were taken on glass plates with a photographic film, a liquid emulsion. And that liquid emulsion was exposed to the light, and there are no pixels. You are capturing the light given off, reflected by that object. And for that reason, Civil War photographs are remarkably sharp and clear. And you'll see some of that in tonight's presentation. So, following Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville, in the spring of 1863, Lee makes the decision to once again invade the North. His hope is to draw the Army of the Potomac out into the open and destroy it, and then move on Washington, D.C., and force the Union into surrender or peace. Following the Battle of Fredericksburg, the movement of the Confederate Army is shown in red. Lee's army proceeds north, starting on around June 3rd. There's a major cavalry engagement, the largest of the war, at Brandy Station. General Stuart and his cavalry are shown by the dashed or dotted line here. The cavalry serve the purpose of reconnaissance for the army. Lee's army proceeds north using the Blue Ridge and South Mountain as a shield, so that the Army of the Potomac cannot see their movement. So paralleling Lee's movement north, the Army of the Potomac moves north. We often say, and I'll show you photographs of this, we often say that the Union center, there's the high water mark. Oh, this is the high water mark of the Confederacy, where Pickett's charge came the furthest north up across the battlefield. And I kind of challenge that, because here's Gettysburg, and Early and other Confederate forces move further north, preceding the Battle of Gettysburg. They get all the way up to Harrisburg, and they get to Wrightsville. And the only reason they were not able to cross the Susquehanna River was because the Union militia at Wrightsville burned the wooden bridge. And by now, Lee is engaged at Gettysburg and recalls those troops. So kind of like one of the little tidbits about the battle is that at the Battle of Gettysburg, the Confederates came in from the north and the Union came in from the south. And there's a lot of misinformation that I won't get into about Gettysburg. You know, the Confederates were there because of shoes. That's why they went north. They needed shoes. Well, the Confederate Army needed everything. They needed shoes, they needed food, they needed horses, they needed wagons, they needed arms. But coming up into Gettysburg, they were pretty well equipped. I included a satellite photograph here just to show you the general geography, the topography of the region. So, of course, Gettysburg sits in the Triassic Basin, the Triassic lowlands. Here's the Susquehanna River. Harrisburg is up here. This is South Mountain, the northernmost extension of the Blue Ridge. Here are the folded Appalachians. Lee's army, the majority of Lee's army, except for the cavalry, come in on the west side of South Mountain. When they hit Chambersburg, um, they gather supplies, they forage, and then here's the Cashtown Gap coming through South Mountain, actually a large earthquake fault. You can see the offset there of South Mountain. The majority of the army comes through Cashtown Gap and approaches Gettysburg. And of course, the story is that the Union cavalry are already there, holding them off on day one. So just to kind of another thing to put things in perspective, during the Battle of Gettysburg, these are the Union corps that were brought up and engaged at Gettysburg, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 6th, 11th, 12th Corps of foot soldiers with the approximate numbers. The famous Little Round Top and the 20th Maine hold this line at all costs. You are the extreme left of the Union line. Joshua Chamberlain in the 20th Maine was part of the 5th Corps under Major General George Sykes. John Sedgwick, the 6th Corps was held in reserve down behind Little Round Top and were only used in sparse numbers to plug holes in the line. Unfortunately, John Sedgwick was killed about a year later at Spotsylvania. It's the famous Sedgwick was walking back and forth across the Union line. The Confederates were about 1,000 yards away, and bullets were ricocheting off the earthworks. And a soldier looked up. Sedgwick was encouraging his men. And the story is one of the Union soldiers reached up and grabbed Sedgwick by the frock, his coat, and said, "General, please get down. We can't afford to lose you." And Sedgwick looked down at him and said, "Don't worry, soldier. At this range, they couldn't hit an elephant." And a second later, a bullet struck him in the mouth and came out the back of his head. And Sedgwick was instantly killed. And he has a statue on Gettysburg. So between artillery and cavalry, if you add these numbers up, the Union Army total up in the 80,000s. At the time of Gettysburg, Lee reorganized his army into 3 corps. The 1st Corps was under Longstreet, the 2nd Corps was under Ewell, and the 3rd Corps was under Ambrose Hill. So we've got 20, 40, 60, including the cavalry. We're looking at a Confederate force of about 72,000 men present at Gettysburg. So what I'm going to show you tonight, I have to credit the person that inspired me to do this type of presentation and work. One of the most well-known Gettysburg historians is Mr. William Frassanito. And I'll show you in an upcoming slide. I had the chance to meet Mr. Frassanito with the new Adams County Historical Society. William Frassanito, I believe, grew up in Gettysburg. He attended Gettysburg College. He had a keen interest in the Civil War, and especially Gettysburg. He has made some major discoveries about the Battle of Gettysburg, uncovering places on the battlefield where photographs were taken, and people had no idea where these pictures were taken because they were never documented by the photographer. Frassanito has written a series of books. If you are interested in vintage photography at Civil War battlefields, I highly recommend. I have his early photography at Gettysburg, and he autographed the copy for me when I was at the Adams County Historical Society. Early photography at Gettysburg describes all the detail of the photographers that photographed after the battle. He's written a few books that are journeys in time. There's one about Gettysburg. There's one about Antietam. He has also written, these are kind of like in magazine format, and this is kind of the inspiration of what I'm going to show you in the majority of tonight. Gettysburg Then and Now, comparing what the locations look like at the time of the battle and what they look like now. Frassanito has made some remarkable discoveries on the battlefield. The new Adams County Historical Society building called Gettysburg Beyond the Battle opened up a few years ago. I highly recommend that if you go to Gettysburg, you must visit this museum. They have talks there and lectures. And after the museum opened, I took another trip to Gettysburg, and I had the wonderful, wonderful opportunity of meeting Mr. Frasanito and bought a bunch of his books, and he signed copies for me, and we had a chance to talk, and there were other Civil War historians there. And you can see Gettysburg and Antietam. The person is just amazing, the knowledge he has about Gettysburg. So another disclaimer is I'm not the first person to do this. Taking photographs of then and now, looking at a vintage photograph taken 100 years ago or 160 years ago, and then going to that location and standing in the same spot and seeing what it looks like today and taking a photograph is not unique. Many, many others have done it before me, but it's a wonderful hobby that I very, very much enjoy doing, and I've done it here in Johnstown, going to in other locations. So at the time of the Civil War in Gettysburg, probably the most famous photographer is Matthew Brady. And Matthew Brady was a photographer that used wet plate emulsions, and he took thousands of photographs of not just Civil War, but also people and portraits and other general subjects. Matthew Brady had numerous employees or apprentices that worked under him. The ones that would go on to be most famous was an apprentice by the name of Alexander Gardner, which is shown in the lower left-hand corner here, and Timothy O'Sullivan, who eventually left Brady and opened up their own photographic studios. Alexander Gardner and Timothy O'Sullivan got to Gettysburg on July 4th, a day after the battle ended and the Confederates began to retreat back across the Potomac River and back into Virginia. Much of the Union Army was still there. Medical camps were set up. Alexander Gardner wanted to photograph the battlefield, and more specifically, he wanted to photograph bodies. So unfortunately, or fortunately, Alexander Gardner and Timothy O'Sullivan's photographs brought the horror of the war to the general public. This sold newspapers, this sold books and magazines. People were fascinated with what could be described as this morbid attention to seeing soldiers dead on the battlefield. So kind of as another warning, a lot of my photographs that I'm going to show you include this tonight. Gardner and O'Sullivan took a series of probably the most famous photographs ever taken during the Civil War, two of which I show you on the bottom of the page. And the neat thing about this is we now know that some of these photographs, the one of the sharpshooter in Devil's Den, were faked. Those bodies were dragged there and set up. And it was Frasanito that discovered this. One of Gardner's most famous photographs is the Harvest of Death, which we'll kind of wrap up with tonight. So if you're interested in the Civil War and Gettysburg, this is probably one of the more famous photographs taken at Gettysburg. This is titled The Home of the Rebel Sharpshooter. And I will show you this. Alexander Gardner published numerous books. This is a reproduction, but it's a softcover book. It's available just about anywhere online, and it's called Gardner's Photographic Sketchbook of the Civil War. And this is volumes 1 and 2 together. And there are just photographs after photographs of Gettysburg and other battlefields, of Gardner's black and white photographs taken of the Civil War. And this is one of the most famous ones. The Home of the Rebel Sharpshooter. We believe that when Gardner arrived on the battlefield, he didn't go to the Union Center, the site of Pickett's charge. And the reason for that is that was the first location on the battlefield that was cleaned up. There were no bodies left at the Union Center, at the angle, the copse of trees, the focus point of Pickett's charge. The southern part of the Gettysburg battlefield, Little Round Top, Big Round Top, Devil's Den, the Rose Farm, that topography is very rugged and difficult to get through. And when Gardner got there on July 4th, there were still bodies present on the battlefield, and that's what he wanted to photograph. The Home of the Rebel Sharpshooter is one of Gardner's more famous photographs. So here's my then and now. Gardner's photograph is on the left, and I'm standing in the same place. This is a photograph that I took in July of 2023. I tried to line up as closely as I possibly could. The large boulders that are present here in the sharpshooter's den uh, are in the same location as they were on July 1st, 1863. In the background here on my photograph, this is the summit of Little Round Top. That is the monument to the 44th New York. Down below here, the valley down below is nicknamed the Valley of Death. The slaughter pen is off to the right. Big Round Top is not visible in this view. It's off to the right. But you can see the same rocks, the same cracks. This photograph caused an enormous amount of controversy. And when Gardner took it, his description in his book is that this sharpshooter died as a result of artillery fire or a ricochet, and the rifle is still leaning up against the rocks here. This rock wall has been built several times, rebuilt several times. It is not known whether Gardner actually stacked these rocks up himself, but we do know that this body, that is a Confederate soldier, and contrary to a lot of claims online, his identity is still unknown. It has never been discovered who this person is, even though his face is very clear. His uniform is Confederate. He's laying on a blanket in which Gardner and O'Sullivan placed the body and then dragged it to this location from about 150 to 200 feet south of here in what's known as the Triangular Field. And here is where he came from. William Frasnito examined photographs that Gardner took, but didn't give a specific location. And these are two of Gardner's photographs that show this same person. This location is about 200 feet southwest of this spot in Devil's Den. This is the same person, the same rifle. This large rock is still present in the battlefield. This is a very difficult area to get to. It's overgrown very, very heavily with brush. It's easy to get to during the wintertime. Frasnito discovered that Gardner and O'Sullivan took this body, they put him on a blanket, they dragged him up into this little nook of rock, and then made up their own caption, and the photograph was staged to show a sharpshooter. This is not a sharpshooter's rifle. The interesting thing about this is I have shown this photograph to forensic pathologists and medical examiners, and the condition of this young soldier's body, the condition of his face, does not match what the other bloated bodies look like on Gettysburg following 3 or 4 days after the battle when they were photographed. He doesn't show signs of decomposition and deterioration of the body that we normally would assume. The days following Gettysburg were extremely hot. It was raining. It doesn't look like the other bodies. My theory is that this was a young Confederate soldier that was wounded and crawled behind this rock and hid for possibly several days and may have died late on July 3rd after Pickett's charge or early on July 4th. The body looks in too good of condition to have been laying there since July 1st or July 2nd. It was on July 2nd that the Confederates moved across the southern region of the battlefield. And here's what we're looking at. So I've tried to include some maps here, but the identification that this was the same body and it was moved was made by historian William Frasnito in 1975. So here's a Google Earth Pro view of the southern end of the Gettysburg battlefield. I've deliberately moved the time where you can go back in time. I like to use winter or fall views because there's no vegetation and you can clearly see detail on the battlefield. So we're looking at the southern part of the battlefield. This is Devil's Den. and Sickles Avenue. Here's Little Round Top. This is the summit of Little Round Top. Sykes Avenue, the location of the 20th Main and Joshua Chamberlain is just out of view over here to the right. This is Plum Run, which is now dammed by beavers and a lake, but this was nicknamed the Valley of Death. This is the slope leading up to Little Round Top. North is to the top of the map. So this is the Valley of Death. This is the slaughter pen in here. Gardner photographed quite a few Confederate dead bodies in this region. There are some really, really famous photographs of Confederates lying behind the boulders here. And those two rocks right there, those are the two large boulders to the left and to the right of the Confederate sharpshooter. So my previous photograph, okay, this view, especially my photograph, is looking in the direction of the arrow. All right. So there's the 44th New York Monument at the summit of Little Round Top. So that's the sharpshooter's den. When you go to Devil's Den, here's the parking spaces below the large boulders. And then the road wraps around and you get up on top of Houck's Ridge with some witness trees and the Union artillery. And that body was dragged from this location. This is the famous triangular field, which borders Devil's Den and the Rose Woods. So one of the then and now. Another famous photograph. This photograph was taken by Matthew Brady and not Gardner. Unfortunately, Matthew Brady doesn't get to the Gettysburg battlefield until a week or two after the battle is over. So by the time Matthew Brady gets to the battlefield, the Gettysburg battlefield, all of the bodies have been buried. There's still a lot of equipment left on the battlefield, but there are no bodies present on the battlefield anymore. They've been buried in shallow graves, later to be removed to cemeteries. But another very, very famous photograph from Gettysburg are the three Confederate prisoners. These were stragglers that were rounded up on or about July 15th. This is Route 30, the Chambersburg Pike. We're about a mile from downtown Gettysburg. This is looking west. Contrary to a lot of reports or claims, no one has ever discovered the identity, the names of these three Confederate prisoners. Just off view, there were Union soldiers guarding them. They ended up in the prisoner of war camp, but this is a week or two. This is July 15th, and Confederates were still wandering around looking for food, or they were deserters. And this is my photograph taken in the same spot today. This wooden fence is long gone, and there's now a stone wall there. And this is the entrance to the Lutheran Seminary. We know the location of this because of that object right there in the background. That is an extremely tall poplar tree that was across the road from the Evergreen Cemetery gate. The famous Evergreen Cemetery. And it's not visible in this view because it no longer stands, but at the time of the battle, that was a distinctive landmark. So another famous then and now photograph. So here's the view of where you're looking. This is Route 30, the Chambersburg Pike coming into Gettysburg. This is Lee's headquarters. And I had written a couple of extra notes here. That's the Mary Thompson House. So Lee's headquarters were along the Chambersburg Pike, the Mary Thompson House. So that previous photograph, there's the little stone wall that's there today. And this is the entrance to the Lutheran Seminary. If you've ever watched the movie Gettysburg, when the cavalry, when General Buford engaged Confederates came from the west along Route 30, was up in the seminary, and John Reynolds arrives, and John Reynolds looks up to him and says, "What goes, John?" And he says, "There's a devil to pay." And that happens right here. The cupola of the seminary is here. So my previous picture taken from that angle. So this is on McPherson's Ridge. The first day's battle, intense fighting here. If Gettysburg would have ended on the evening of the first day, the number of troops engaged during the first day and the casualties, it would rank as the 12th largest battle of the Civil War. So if Gettysburg would have ended on the night of July 1st, the number of troops involved and the casualties would have made it the 12th largest battle engagement of the Civil War, and yet it went on for another 2 days. This pond was present on the battlefield right off Route 30 and the little visitor center. This is a Matthew Brady photograph. As a matter of fact, that's Matthew Brady. He set up the camera and his assistant took the photograph. This is the McPherson Woods or Herbst Woods or Reynolds Woods. Just out of view here to the left is where John Reynolds was killed within 20 minutes of arriving on the battlefield. One of the highest ranking generals to be killed during the battle. This is my photograph taken in July of 2023. I'm standing in the same spot, looking in the same direction. The pond is overgrown, but it's still there. And here is the Google map. Excuse me. If you come into Gettysburg on Route 30 from Chambersburg, you hit the first little visitor center. And this is McPherson Ridge and the monument to John Buford and his cavalry, and you have Stone Avenue or Meredith Avenue, and if you turn and park along here, there's the pond. And my previous picture is taken looking in that direction. Stone Avenue and Meredith Avenue winds through Reynolds Woods or Herbst Woods and comes out here and comes back to Route 30. And John Reynolds Monument, where John Reynolds was struck by a bullet in the back of the head and killed within 20 minutes of arriving on the battlefield. His monument is right there. And you can park the car here and walk over to it. So an Alexander Gardner photograph. This is the Leicester house. Lydia Leicester was a 52-year-old widow. And this is along the Taneytown Road. It's at the back of the Union line. This is directly behind the Union Center, the copse of trees, and the focus point of Pickett's charge. This is a photograph taken by Alexander Gardner on July 4th or 5th. And the Leicester house was pretty much destroyed. You can see dead horses from the artillery scattered along what was then a dirt road, but today is paved. This is the Taneytown Road, and I'm standing in about the same spot that Alexander Gardner took the photograph. The stone walls have been rebuilt. You can walk around the house, and if you walk off to the left here, after about 400 or 500 yards, you end up at the Union Center and the focal point of Pickett's charge. Excuse me. The Leicester House was used as General Meade's headquarters during the battle. And here's the view of that photograph. So this is the Leicester House along the Taneytown Road. Downtown Gettysburg is maybe a half mile to 3/4 of a mile to the north here. The Evergreen Cemetery is up here. And this is Taneytown Road, and you can walk across these fields. And here's the famous angle in Hancock Avenue and the copse of trees. So this was the Union Center, and the Confederates came across this field during Pickett's charge. So here's the famous Evergreen Cemetery gate. This was photographed by Alexander Gardner and Timothy O'Sullivan, taken on July 7th, several days after the battle. So this is on East Cemetery Hill, the scene of very, very heavy fighting on the evening of the first day and throughout the second day. This is behind the Union Center, kind of between Culp's Hill and the Union Center. The Evergreen Gate was badly damaged, but survived. These semicircular dirt mounds are called lunettes. They're shaped like a crescent moon, and these were the locations of the Union artillery pieces. The dirt was piled up to give the artillery crews some type of protection, and I'm standing in about the same place today, and those lunettes are still there with monuments to the artillery crews. And there's the view of that previous photograph. So the cemetery gate is here, and you can see the semicircular lunette. So that view is kind of towards the southwest. This is East Cemetery Hill, and you can see the other Union artillery positions and the semicircular lunettes that are still there. So here's a close-up. This photograph was taken by Matthew Brady on July 15th, a week or two after the battle. They're beginning to clean up. There are no bodies present in this view. This is Matthew Brady's assistant. In many of Matthew Brady's photographs, his assistant, and his name escapes me at this point, I cannot remember his name, I apologize for that. But in many of the photographs taken by Matthew Brady, his assistant's always wearing dark pants, a white shirt, and this big, wide, white-brimmed hat. And standing in the cemetery gate on guard is a Pennsylvania militia soldier. And we can zoom in on him, and this gives us a very, very good view of what a typical Union soldier would have looked like, armed with all his equipment on at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. And there's Matthew Brady's assistant. So let's go to the southern portion of the battlefield. So north is to the top. I have some of the features labeled here. A famous location that I'm really not covering tonight is the Trussell Farm. One of the more spectacular events during the Battle of Gettysburg by the 9th Massachusetts Artillery and their stand against the advancing Confederates. This is the Emmitsburg Pike, and this is the Peach Orchard, the wheat field. Here's Little Round Top, Big Round Top, Devil's Den, and the famous Rose Woods and the Loop. And this location right here on the western side of the Rose Woods was a focal point of Alexander Gardner's photographic journey across the Gettysburg battlefield. And here's an enlargement of this that I did not label. So here are the Rose Woods. This is the Rose Farm. We're pretty much on the southern end of the battlefield here. On July 2nd, the number of troops engaged in Rose Woods, the Peach Orchard, the wheat field, Devil's Den, and Little Round Top far outnumbered the number of troops on Pickett's charge. This was a larger Confederate assault against the Union line than Pickett's charge was on the afternoon of July 3rd. This was Longstreet's first attempt, Longstreet's assault to remove the Union from the far left flank and sweep around them. And of course, that failed. A famous location is the Rose Farm and the Rose Woods. And Alexander Gardner, here we're zooming in. So let me just go back one slide here. This road, if you drive around Devil's Den, you drop down into the Rose Woods, and then you can make a sharp left turn, and you get on Brook Avenue. And right about here is a monument to the Second Delaware. And if you park at the monument to the Second Delaware, there's a little wide spot here, and you walk through about 15 or 20 feet of woods, and you come up onto a sloping field that is the Rose Farm. And this was the site of intensive fighting all on July 2nd as Confederate troops moved into the Peach Orchard and the wheat field and Devil's Den and pretty much annihilated Sickles' Third Corps, retreating back to the Taneytown Road. A famous location on the Gettysburg battlefield is this area of the Rose Farm. There's a cattle gate here. This is still an active farm today. I've been there a couple of times, and cows have kind of been walking past me. But in some of Gardner's photographs, well, in a few particular photographs, there's a very unusual rock that's visible in the satellite photographs. This rock has a large split in it when viewed from above. And Frassinito called this the split rock. So you can park here. There's a wide spot in the road. If you park at the Second Delaware Infantry Monument, you park here and you walk down the road about 50 feet, and there's a little path that goes up through the road, and there's a cattle gate here, a zigzag Z-shaped gate. You can walk up into the field of the Rose Woods, and you come right up onto the back side of this rock. And I think it's one of the more interesting places on the battlefield. So, excuse the pictures of corpses. This Gardner and O'Sullivan took a series of at least 15 or 20, and possibly more, photographic plates right there at the edge of the woods on the Rose Farm. The reason he took these photographs were most of the Union troops were already buried. After the battle was over, they buried the Union dead first, and the Confederates were left on the battlefield. As burial crews moved across the battlefield, they started from the north and they moved south. So Gardner wanted to photograph bodies, so the southern part of the battlefield was the most likely place to go. As a matter of fact, this is Gardner's photographic wagon. That was where he developed the photographs that he was taking. In one of Gardner's photographs, in many of Gardner's photographs, we see Confederate dead that have been dragged and lined up in lines and V-shaped patterns, and some of them are covered with blankets. Many of the bodies have been stripped of their equipment. They're missing shoes. Of course, they have no weapons on them or equipment. All of that was removed. It may have been removed. We don't know if it was removed by Union troops or if their fellow Confederates removed it after they fell. This series of photographs appeared in magazines, books, photographic studios, and it was credited for Antietam, Chickamauga, Chancellorsville. For some reason, Gardner did not give a specific location for these photographs. And 100 years passed before we discovered the location of these photographs. It was credited to be the first day's battle at Gettysburg and soldiers from the 24th Michigan. William Frasnito, the Gettysburg historian, was determined to find the location of this unusual place on the battlefield. Now, these are all Confederates. You're looking at the same bodies here, taken from different angles. And there's a whole series of photographic plates. Here is a stereo card of the same bodies taken from a different direction. One of the Confederate bodies had a very distinctive striped blanket draped across them. And here, the stamping on the stereo card credits these bodies for being on Culp's Hill. Well, William Frasnito knew this wasn't Culp's Hill. He knew that it was taken somewhere on the Gettysburg battlefield. So what Frasnito did, and I think I have one slide out of order here. What William Frasnito did was in the early 60s, he began walking the entire battlefield. Frasnito spent years. He knew that this was a tree line. He saw this distinctive large boulder with this huge crack in it that he called the Split Rock. And Frasnito was determined to find the location of where these Confederate dead were interred, were buried, or where was this on the battlefield. So he knew it wasn't Culp's Hill. Here's just a little map that I've made following Frasnito's work. Each one of the white ovals is a Confederate body. They've been lined up in rows in a V shape, and the burial crews were getting ready to bury them. Here's the famous split rock that appears in some of the photographs. This is based on Frasnito's work in 1975. Here's Gardner's photograph, and I'm standing in exactly the same place. So this spot on the battlefield is now accessible. Here is the cattle gate. You park on Brooks Avenue, which is down below the woods here. You climb a small hill. The Second Delaware Monument is out of view back in the woods, and you come up and you are directly behind the split rock. You can walk across this field and you can stand in the exact same location where these Confederate dead were laid out prior to burial. They've identified at least 44 different bodies at this location. William Frasnito walked the battlefield for years with this photograph that you see on the left. And in 1967, which is quite a number of years ago, in 1967, that's what he saw. And he knew, bingo, I found the location of the unknown Confederate dead, and it is the Rose Farm. It's not the first day's battle. It's not Antietam. It's not Chancellorsville. It's not some other battle. Gardner was here on the Rose Farm, and that's where the Confederate dead were. pretty much every time I go to Gettysburg, um, I park on Brook Avenue and I'll take a walk up, and you can see the cattle gate in the back here. It's a narrow opening, so the cows can't get through it, and it zigzags, but you come right up behind the split rock. And this is where the Confederate bodies were all laid out. It's a fairly large boulder. That's igneous diabase. And it's a very distinctive location on the battlefield. Here's Gardner and O'Sullivan's photograph again. This photograph on the right is taken from this same location, but turned around and looking in the opposite direction. And we can identify the different soldiers by the position the bodies are in and the way that the legs are bent and the knees are bent and the striped blankets. And although it's kind of a morbid scene, it's part of the forensic geology at Gettysburg. So this is really the key, that we can use the distinctive geologic features in the rocks to identify places, probably not just on Gettysburg, but other battlefields where we weren't sure where these photographs were taken. And this is Gardner's photographic studio right there. That's where he developed his photographs. So this rock is also very distinctive. You can climb up. We're zooming in here. You can walk past the split rock, and this rock here is just out of view to the right of this photograph on the left-hand side. And I've sat on this rock. I've stood right next to it. I've sat here and taken photographs, and I tell you, it's extremely eerie. You get a very shaky, sincere feeling when you walk across this field and you realize that these soldiers, these dead bodies, were lined up here on the hallowed ground, waiting for burial. And here are my photographs. So this rock is still there today. A lot of the fields here on the Rose Farm are manicured, or the cows will keep the grass short. But you could see that there was a Confederate body laying right here alongside the rock, and there were two other bodies right here, and they're partially covered with a blanket. These bodies were buried on the Rose Farm, and they were later, what's the term, disinterred, dug back up and moved to Confederate cemeteries. So the last time I was down there, this was heavily overgrown. So here's the same view. I'm back a little further. These two boulders here are hidden beneath this overgrowth. So I'm kind of standing off to the left here, and the split rock, I believe, is just out. Oh no, there it is. I have my little panel in the way. So there's a split rock. So I'm lined up in about at the exact same spot. So once again, I didn't discover this. This is William Frasnito. This is standing at the split rock and looking directly east. So there was a large V of Confederate soldiers lined up. So these bodies here would have been right here on the field in front of me. So, and here is a mystery that has yet to be solved. So we've solved the mystery of these Confederate bodies on the Rose Farm, but this one is still pending. Gardner and O'Sullivan took a series of photographs that he titled The Harvest of Death. This is the only known series of photographs taken during the Civil War that show Union dead. These are Union soldiers, and this is a Union burial crew that Gardner asked them to stop so he could photograph the bodies. So you can see they're holding their shovels. There's other bodies in the background here, but these are the only known series of photographs of Union dead. Gardner took this photograph on the Gettysburg battlefield. It's labeled Harvest of Death on the Gettysburg battlefield, but that's all he said. As of 2025, no one has been able to figure out the location that this photograph was taken in. There have been attempts to match the topography. You can see that there's a sloping hill in the background. There's a ravine. There's a wooden picket fence that was knocked down. We have no idea where this photograph was taken. There have been attempts to use AI to superimpose the topography in the photograph with topographic maps. Gardner took a series of these photographs from different angles showing the same bodies. In one of his photographs, he says, view in the field on the right wing where General Reynolds fell. General Reynolds was killed on the first day battle at about 10 o'clock in the morning on McPherson Ridge. There's nothing on McPherson Ridge that matches this topography. Excuse me. There have been scores of Civil War historians that have been trying to find the location of this spot on the Gettysburg battlefield. To date, nothing matches the topography. This is another view of the same group of bodies. This view, we don't know what direction this was taken in, but you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there's 6 bodies here. And the next photograph is taken from down here, looking down slope up at them, but it's in color. These are the same Union bodies. You can see the Union uniforms. They've been stripped of their equipment. The bodies definitely look like they've been out on the battlefield for several days. These are Confederates in the background. So when we enlarge the view, we can see that these are Confederate uniforms. So this was an active location on the battlefield where Union and Confederates were in close proximity to each other. You can see that some of them have had their shoes stripped off. We don't know who these people are in the background, but this was titled The Harvest of Death. Frasnito has done studies on the bodies, and here I've duplicated that for you. The photograph on the left-hand side shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bodies. The photograph on the right-hand side, those are the same 5 bodies, but taken from 180 degrees in a different direction, looking across the slope. And we can see more Union dead back here, and then these other bodies are all Confederates. And to this date, no one has ever been able to find the location of this on the battlefield. There is one person, John Cummings, in 2013. John Cummings analyzed the topography and
That's it.
Right
Thank you.
up here.
No,
up
I'm not
here.
going to touch it.
oh, we good? John Cummings, I think I lost my little video thing here. There we go. In 2013, a Gettysburg historian by the name of John Cummings published a report, and he thinks he's found the location. He claims that these Union dead, and I showed you this earlier in the program, this is Route 30 coming out of Cashtown Gap. So that's Route 30, the Chambersburg Pike. Here's the first visitor center you come to. When you approach Gettysburg from the west, there's a little visitor center here. Here's where the pond is. This is Willoughby Run. Lee's headquarters, the house is right there. Here's the Lutheran Seminary. This is where the Confederate prisoners were photographed. Here's the center of Gettysburg and the traffic circle. This is McPherson Ridge, the famous railroad cut. Oak Ridge and the Eternal Flame is up here to the north. The McPherson Barn. This is Reynolds Woods or Herbst Woods or McPherson Woods. This is where General Reynolds was killed. John Cummings thinks he's got a pretty good match with the topography, that the Union dead were right here in this field, and the view is towards the northeast, looking towards Lee's headquarters, the Thompson House in the background, and up towards Oak Ridge. So I've kind of placed the photograph there of this view of the Union dead. And the next slide, there I'm standing. I took this in July of 2024. So here's the photograph of those 5 Union bodies with the burial crew. We have a sloping hill here and a hill in the background. It looks like a ravine. When I was there in July of 2024, last July, this is sorghum that was planted. Here's Lee's headquarters. So that's the Thompson House. This is Route 30. You can see the tractor trailer truck. This is McPherson Ridge, and Oak Hill is back here. And John Reynolds Woods, where John Reynolds was killed, is just out of view to the left. So if we remove the sorghum The National Park Service and the other Gettysburg historians are not convinced. They don't they don't believe that's the location. So they challenge that. Whether or not it's a good match, we don't know.
Barry, this is Kenneth,
But we certainly know
8:20
that
p.m.
there were lots of Union dead on the first day's battle along McPherson Ridge. So there's the mystery. So anyone that's a true Gettysburg forensic uh, investigator, you can look at these photographs. There's more of these bodies than I've shown, but you can look at Gardner's photographs and see if you can match up the topography on the Gettysburg battlefield. One of the things we need to realize is that it's been over 160 years. New roads have been built, fields have been plowed, woods have been cut down, new trees have grown. So it might be very, very difficult. There's no distinguishing rocks in these photographs. And that's what makes it even more difficult. And Gardner didn't identify it. So I want to leave you with this. For all of the books and publications and photographs that have been taken of the Gettysburg battlefield, we have photographs of the dead that are Gardner and Brady. No one, to our present day knowledge, they might be out there somewhere in great great grandpa's attic, or we don't know. No Gettysburg photographers took photographs of the Union Center, the angle, and the copse of trees following Pickett's charge. When Gardner and O'Sullivan got there and Matthew Brady got there, they totally ignored the location of Pickett's charge. And it wasn't until the 1880s that we get the first photograph of the Union Center, and this is one of those photographs. This is a Library of Congress photograph. This is the copse of trees. That's the high water mark. There are monuments all along this now. Off the view to the right here is the angle. This is big. You're looking south. There's a paved road here right now, Hancock Avenue. The Pennsylvania Monument, the biggest monument on the Gettysburg battlefield, is right here. This is Big Round Top. This is Little Round Top. Devil's Den is down here, kind of out of view. The Confederates during Pickett's charge came across this field, and the Union troops were lined up on the other side of the copse of trees, and these rocks are still there. We've never been able to zoom in and read what that sign says, but there's a person on horseback pointing to it. But this is one of the few photographs of the Union Center, but it wasn't taken until 1882. The cyclorama of Gettysburg that was painted by Paul Philippe Audu, he used these photographs to paint the cyclorama. And here's the complete view. So this is the previous photograph I showed you. They actually set up a wooden platform and they took a 360-degree view of the Gettysburg battlefield from the Union Center. And the copse of trees is off to the right. There's South Mountain looking west and southwest. This is the Cadore Farm that is still there on the battlefield today. This looks like a lake, but it's not. It's a cultivated field. This is the Emmitsburg Road, and you can drive past that farm. It's very, very well kept. Big Round Top is off to the left. This bottom photograph attaches to the right-hand side of this upper one. We don't know what that guy was doing there, posing, or a couple of men on horseback here. This is the angle, the famous angle, which the Confederates breached the Union line at this location, several hundred Confederates, which were eventually all killed or captured. And this is what's known as the high water mark. So the Confederates advanced across this field a 1 mile distance, and that's the focal point of Pickett's charge. And those are the photographs that the Gettysburg cyclorama was based on. Paul Philippe Audu used eyewitness accounts, descriptions of Union soldiers to help paint the cyclorama. So here's the cyclorama, and here's Big Round Top, Little Round Top. You can see the smoke because the battle was still raging there. Here's the copse of trees. Union troops. Here are the Confederates. There's the Cadore Farm. Here are the Confederates coming over the Union line. at the angle. Um, One of the Philip Adu painted himself into this painting. I don't know if I have that here. Yes, we'll come to that in a second. But uh, General Meade is shown here, a lot of the other generals. Um, these two people are brothers that were friends with the artist. He painted them into the scene. And right here, this cannon, um, that person right there is a Medal of United States Medal of Honor winner. That is Alonzo Cushing, uh, who died manning this cannon as the Confederates came across the wall. This is the U.S. Artillery Battery number 4, and Cushing forced his artillerymen to stay at the cannons as the Confederates surged over the angle. And supposedly, he was struck 2 or 3 times by bullets. It tore open his stomach, and then he was struck in the face, in the mouth. And before he died, he grabbed the lanyard of the cannon and he yelled out, "I shall give them one more shot." He fired one last round of the cannon and then was struck down. So he's painted into the view. Um, a very, very famous young person in charge of the artillery battery. And this part of the cyclorama, this attaches to the right-hand side up here. Here's the actual angle and the Confederate troops pouring over the angle. And the artist painted himself into the view. So this is looking further to the north. So here's South Mountain. And here are the Confederate brigades and troops continuing to advance Pickett's charge. And there's the artist. So that is Paul Philip Adu. He painted himself into the cyclorama. So that's a little bit of a trivia there. So hope you enjoyed the journey then and now. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, hope I didn't go too long. Oh, 8:27, not bad.
You're,
So, and
you're good.
just to add a couple of things, um, Battlefield Photographer, Civil War magazine, Battlefield Photographer, is an awesome little publication. And the reason I hold this one up is because we're still making discoveries. This is a famous photograph that was never published before. It was found in a collection of photographic plates in Hanover, Pennsylvania, that is taken on the Gettysburg battlefield. Um, a couple of weeks after the battle. We don't know who any of these people are, but that was taken at Camp Letterman, where thousands of Union troops were treated for their injuries. And that fatherly looking figure with his hands on the shoulders of those young wounded boys, you can see the boy has, we have a couple of amputees in there. He's missing a leg. That kid looks like he's 16 or 17 years old and he's had a leg amputated. We don't know who that man was, but he's got his hands on the shoulders, comforting them. That is a medical tent. And that photograph was discovered a number of years ago in a collection of photographic plates. And it was published for the first time in Battlefield Photographer and other magazines. And maybe there are photographs out there of what was the Union Center and Pickett's Charge, but none have ever been found. Matthew Brady, Gardner, none of them photographed the Union Center. And Jerry, you would know this. The Field Conference of Pennsylvania Geologists was back at Gettysburg in 2008. So
Right.
those of you that want here's the guidebook. There's the entire guidebook is about the Battle of Gettysburg. And that's free online. You can download it. And that's the field conference guide from September 25th and 27th, 2008. And that's available online. So thank you very much. I could have gone on for another 2 or 3 hours. I have several hundred other then and now photographs that I had to eliminate because I knew I would go pretty long. If you have any questions at all, just, unmic and ask them, or if I said anything that you might disagree with, or I'm more than happy to discuss it. Jerry, thank you again.
No, I
Yeah,
enjoyed that. I enjoyed the program. I did not know all about the split, 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 the rock out there in the field,
Oh, the Split Rock.
right?
So on your Gettysburg trip coming up on September 15th, you taking a coach bus?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you get the coach bus down there on that Brook Road, you might just be able to squeeze it in on the right-hand side.
Uh,
As soon as you pass the second Delaware Monument, there's a wide spot in the road. If you get them all off the bus and you get them to walk up through the field, watch out for ticks.
yeah.
But you can bring them up there. It's a great place for a group picture. And I think it's one of the more solemn locations on the battlefield. When you look at the photographs of the Confederate dead and yeah, the Split Rock, it's one of my favorite places. I'd have to say that Split Rock and the Trossel Farm uh, um, are my first and second favorite locations on the battlefield. A lot of people focus on Little Round Top, uh, but there's a lot of other places that have very, very unique history in the battle. So thank you. Chance to present again. So
Yeah, my father really studied the Battle of Gettysburg when I was knee high to a grasshopper, and unfortunately I did not pay attention. But the Confederate sharpshooter at Devil's Den was probably one of my favorite places because I saw the picture and I imagined, man, that guy died right there, And then of
yeah,
course
yeah,
Franzenito disproved that as you described. So
right.
yeah.
And
Uh,
it was a thrill to meet him. I mean, I knew that they were having a book signing at the Adams County Historical Society. So I told Mary, I said, "Hey, we're going to Gettysburg this weekend." And as soon as I got there, I'm about 3 hours, maybe 3 hours and 15 minutes from Gettysburg. So we came in through Chambersburg, came south from Chambersburg, and you go right past the museum. And we stopped there, and I walked in, and there he is. He's sitting at a table signing books, and I got a chance to talk with him and get all his books signed, and um, spent more money than I should have. But
I did hear him talk many, many years ago at York College,
yeah, yeah, he's a
uh,
fascinating person.
where I
Yeah.
first got to hear his work. Okay, what was I going to bring up? I was going to bring up something else here tonight. So anyway, yeah, if you're not signed up for the Gettysburg Battlefield Geology bus trip, you have another week to do that. And thanks, Steve, for not giving out too much information tonight of what I'm going to be talking about. And my permit says no history, so I'm not going to talk about much history because I really don't know much history on the battlefield. So
And they did the same thing to me
yeah,
last year when I led it. They told me I wasn't allowed to talk about rocks.
right, because you didn't put geology in your description.
Right, right. Yes, they said don't talk about rocks. So I didn't. I didn't talk about rocks.
So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed that for sure. And forensic geology uh, is used in a couple senses. Forensic geology is also used if, like for example, I was involved in a case of a missing child whose body was never found, but they know that the boy was murdered, maybe down in the Philadelphia area, and his body was deposited someplace, maybe along the Susquehanna River in Lancaster County. But they did have they did have shoes that belonged to the boy that had mud on it. So somebody had to analyze the mud. Where did that dirt come from? Is that Philadelphia dirt? Is that Chester County dirt? Lancaster County dirt? So that's another term of forensic geology sort of thing there. So anyway, I don't see any other questions popping up. I guess you answered everything there, Mr. Steve. And certainly if you go to Gettysburg, as Steve alluded to, go to the new museum. Uh, they do have uh, they do have a great dinosaur footprint. from the Trossel Quarry. And they also do have a piece of the Mount Joy meteorite, which was actually found in Adams County in south of Gettysburg. So they do have a little geology there too. So without further ado, I believe we're going to end our show tonight. And as you all know, you're all pretty much veterans. This video will be on jonesgeo.us in about an hour or less. And you can go back and watch it again or refer to it as others. I just saw a question pop up here. Steve, have you ever read the Forensic Geologist books by Tony Wiggins?
No, I answered. I said, but now
Oh,
I'm going to look them up. I'll read them now.
okay. All right.
Thanks.
All right. So, all right. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Dr. Pomeroy from your college will be talking to us about the environmental geography of Scotland.
Oh,
So again, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jerry.
Yep. Thank you there, Steve.
All right. Enjoy your Gettysburg trip.
We will.